恭敬大德圣听，维持法会，以及觉众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生，脱失离苦得乐，殊增无生。Were the Sangha with great virtue out of compassion for the sake of this assembly and all living beings. Please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to live suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo saranto suchetoya alahati sanmya sanputocha. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all good knowing advisors, welcome back to this week's class number 55, as we explore the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, through the lens of the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra. So let's recite Medicine Master Buddha's name 7 times. Namo, quelling disasters, lengthening life. Medicine Master Buddha 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 Namo, quelling disasters, lengthening life. Medicine Master Buddha, Medicine Master does come one. 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 Okay, let me end this slideshow and bring up today's slides. Okay, so Ron has a question regarding what to do with all of the Dharma related materials that he has accumulated over time. So everyone, you can see his question in the chat box and you can if you have any ideas, you can help Ron out. Okay, so what we're going to do today is, first of all, I'm going to share with you, actually second, I'm going to share with you the last week we ended with a story that I told from memory, which I found out wasn't entirely accurate, about Mahamaguliyana. I found the story. The story was told by Shufu, and I'm going to share it. So that was the second thing. First thing is we are going to have a summary of what we've done so far in terms of precepts, because we spent quite a lot of classes on precepts so far. And I just wanted to make sure people, especially those that attend the classes on a weekly basis and not just listen to YouTube, that we understand what we're trying to do. Okay, or you understand what I'm trying to do, and I also understand what I'm trying to do. Okay, so what have we explored so far about precepts and why? Okay, what we have explored is why are we looking at precepts? Because right now in the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra, the Buddha is speaking, I think it's Shakyamuni Buddha, is speaking about people who fall into the lower realms because they do not follow the precepts. So that's why. And so what we've learned so far is that the Shakyamuni Buddha, in the last sutra that he spoke before he entered Nirvana, he gave us instructions to take the precepts as our master. Shufu said that the precepts are the foundation of the Dharma, meaning if you want to learn the Dharma, then the precepts form the foundation that we need in able to proceed properly, I guess, a foundation. We've learned that holding the precepts is the same as if we are by the Buddha side all the time. We've looked at how the history of the precept against drinking came along. That was a fairly interesting story. We looked at the role of precepts in the Noble Eightfold Path and the importance of the Noble Eightfold Path in terms of practice, because the Buddha said that it doesn't matter which teacher you follow, because this question was asked by someone who at that time was not the Buddha's disciple, and he was confused. There were so many teachers around, and he asked the Buddha how would he know which teaching to follow. And the Buddha said, instead of replying him which teacher was good or which teacher was successful, the Buddha just said, look for a teaching that has the Noble Eightfold Path. If it has the Noble Eightfold Path, it has sages, which means people who have ended birth and death, and that's one criteria you should use. And then because precepts are part of the Noble Eightfold Path, and the Noble Eightfold Path begins with right view, we use that as a platform to understand, to develop right view about the precepts, meaning we explored how karma is created by body, speech, and mind, and how precepts govern. So that's why precepts govern the actions of our body, the speech that we make, and the thoughts in our mind. And without precepts, it's akin to driving a car without knowing where, how to get to your destination. You know where you want to go, but you don't have a map. You don't have GPS. You don't have a phone that tells you to turn left or turn right. So you just keep on driving. You just drive and drive and drive, and you have no idea about where you're going. And then the Buddha says that in a person of wrong view, meaning if you don't understand what you're doing, then wrong resolve or intention comes into being. And from wrong resolve, you create wrong speech. And from wrong speech, you create wrong action, and then wrong livelihood, and then there's wrong effort, and then there's wrong mindfulness, and then wrong concentration. And all you get in return, because all your effort is put in without proper understanding, is you don't get to where you want. You only get unwholesome results in return. So the Shurangama Sutra The Shakyamuni Buddha in the Shrangama Sutra says, this is like a person cooking sand, hoping to get rice. It says no matter how long you boil the sand, you are never going to get rice because you never started with rice in the first place. We learn how faith and confidence in the Buddha's Dharma forms an important part in right view. Then in the Digga Janu Sutta, the Buddha explains how precepts leads to happiness, not just in this life, but in future lives. And then what a person with virtue will experience is an increase in wealth, a good reputation, a confident deportment, a peaceful death, and a heavenly rebirth. And then we also looked at how precepts, the role of precepts when it comes to, we always say precept, samadhi, wisdom, precept, samadhi, wisdom. And the Buddha outlined exactly how from precepts, it leads to concentration and wisdom. And from there, you can see that concentration is not a skill of itself. It's not just sitting down and concentrating, but the foundation of precepts allows your mind to settle down first. It's your character that you work on first, and then you apply the skill of concentration. Okay, let me see, we have a question. Okay, Ruchang, we'll get to your question later. Thanks. Okay, let me see, where were we? We also look at precepts as a gift. When you hold precepts, it's not just for yourself, but when you hold precepts well with the right understanding, you realize that you are giving freedom to others from danger. You are giving freedom to others from animosity. You're not oppressing the beings around you. You're not putting them in danger. So because you're doing that to other living beings, then in the future, you, or in the present, you shall also receive freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, and freedom from oppression, because of the way you hold the precepts when it comes to other living beings. So you have to ask yourself, the way you hold the precepts, does it lead to other people feeling like they can trust you, they're more comfortable around you? And do you, in, how you say, in return, is that true? So that's something we have to examine within ourselves. We also looked at the realities of life, meaning we are still subject to sickness, old age, death, and the results of our karma, and how we, because of that, we need to take responsibility for ourselves. Because prayers and wishes, the Buddha says, does nothing. Because he said, if prayers and wishes work, then everyone would never fall sick, or you would recover quickly. Everyone would never die, or you will live to a long old age, a healthy long old age, and no one would be poor, because people who pray for and wish for wealth would get that in return. So meaning, if we are responsible for ourselves, we should not wait until it's too late and then we regret for not planting the right causes for future conditions, meaning creating the right wholesome karma. We also learned that karma is not just any action, but the Buddha said karma is volitional action. It's only volitional or intentional action that the Buddha classifies as karma. So this is important because it eliminates a lot of superstition in Buddhism, meaning if you don't understand the heart or the rationale, that there's more to it than just someone doing something. There's also the intention as well. And then let me see. Then we look at the Buddha. We look at suffering again in terms of old age, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, distress, pain, and what causes suffering. And then we went halfway into the story of Kisa Gotami and the mustard seed, where this was last week, so it should still be fresh in everyone's minds. If not, she started off by Venerable Gotami talked about her past lives and how she met past Buddhas and made the resolve. She was inspired by a nun who wore cross robes or right robes, and how she, in one of her previous lives, she and her other 6 sisters, there were total 7 of them, she wanted to live the home life. I don't remember about the other 6 sisters. The father didn't allow her. And in this present life during Shakyamuni Buddha's time, of all the 7 sisters, 6 were nuns and 1 was the Buddha's chief patroness. That means of all the Buddha's female lay disciples, she was foremost in supporting the Dharma. Okay, so today we're going to continue with the story of Kisa Gotami, but before that, let's finish one of the we have another story first. So this is Shufu told us this in the Shurangama, where he was lecturing on the Shurangama Sutra, and you can find this in the older edition where there's 8 volumes. This is in volume 1. So the Shufu said, one Shakyamuni Buddha went to a certain country to collect alms, accompanied by all his disciples except Mahamoggallana, only to find that no one there would give them offerings. So there's 2 spellings for Mahamoggallana. The one in orange right at the top is the Pali spelling, Mahamoggallana, whereas the one in the text that I copied directly from the Shurangama Sutra is more of a Sanskrit style, or BTTS, Sanskrit hybrid. Anyway, the story goes, neither the king nor his government officials nor the citizens made offerings to the Buddha or his disciples. And then later, however, when Mahamoggallana arrived in that country, there was a complete change of heart. The king, the officials, and all the citizens very respectfully gathered around to welcome Mahamoggallana and to bow to him. They beseeched him to let them know what he needed so they could make offerings to him. The Buddha's disciples did not understand why the Buddha, one of such great virtue, received no offerings from the people of this country, while when the Buddha's disciple arrived, the whole town turned out to greet him and everyone made offerings to him. What's the meaning of this? The disciples asked the Buddha. So the Buddha told his disciples, the great officials and the citizens make no offerings to me because in a past life I failed to set up conditions with them, and consequently we have no affinity with one another. So that's the power of having, when you have create affinities or in your relationships with people, how important wholesome affinity is. What's wholesome affinity? We'll get to that in the next slide. So Shakyamuni, Shufu further explains, and he's explaining what Shakyamuni Buddha is explaining to the rest of the monks, because this is Shakyamuni's Buddha reply. Shakyamuni Buddha's reply, and he said, once long ago, ages prior to this one, Mahamoggallana was a firewood gatherer. One day, while picking up firewood, he bumped against a nest of bees, and they swarmed out to attack him. Mahamoggallana simply recited the Buddha's name and made a vow saying, Namo Buddha, you bees don't sting me. In the future, when I have realized the way, you will be the first ones I take across to Buddhahood. Renounce your evil thoughts and stop harming people. So this wasn't an ordinary firewood gatherer. This firewood gatherer understood enough about the Dharma, first, not to react against the bees that would harm the bees. Instead, he tried to reason with the bees, and he made a vow. He made a vow to cross them over in the future when he could. So as a result of this vow, the bees did not sting him. Eventually, the queen bee became the king of this country, and the drones and workers became the officials and citizens. When Mahamoggallana, now a bhikshu, not just a bhikshu at this time, he was already a 4th stage arhat, came to this city, the former bees whom he had to take across all bowed and welcomed him. Such is the power of his former vow. So Shufu goes on to say, taking this situation to heart, we should always establish wholesome affinities by being kind to everyone. We should vow to lead all people and all creatures to Buddhahood. A vow is invincible, but living beings have the equivalent of a radio receiver in their mind so they can tune in to it. A vow is not tangible or visible, but beings will instinctively know if you are good to them. You should resolve to rescue all living beings. Anyone who maintains this frame of mind will have affinities wherever he goes. Okay. How can you, first of all, for those of you who have the question, is this true? Can bees become humans? Well, you have to practice to find out if you are skeptical or if you think you have enough understanding of how cause and effect works to be able to make such a judgment, then you prove it to yourself, find out for yourself, okay? Secondly, for those of you who want to understand more about affinities and how they work, look at yourself. There are people that you meet in this life that you just get along. There are people that you meet that you admire. There are people that you meet that you just do not like, no matter what happens. That's affinities. It's something you cannot explain, but it's just a feeling that you have. Yeah, some people you when you meet them, you don't even really know who they are, but you just feel like you're very comfortable with them, and they end up being your good friends. Yeah, so all this, or you meet people who you fall in love when you don't fall in love with anyone else. So that's how you can prove to yourself, or that's proof of affinities, whether you understand where it comes from or not. Okay, so if you hold the 5 precepts well, in a way that as a responsibility to all living beings, so not just for yourself, but you realize that all living beings wants the same thing as you do, which is happiness and freedom from oppression and animosity, and you hold the 5 precepts in that way, you are developing wholesome affinities with everyone. And why this story came about is because Ron had a question about ants in his home and how to deal with ants. So Ron, this is one really good example for all of us on how we can examine the state of our mind. Usually we just see everything as an inconvenience to us. We don't take responsibility, for the things that we have done. And when the time comes and it's an inconvenience, we just want to get rid of it without remembering how we put ourselves in this situation in the first place, or the consequences of our present actions for our future. So always be mindful of our speech, our actions, and our thoughts. And we can use the 5 precepts as a mirror to be mindful on how to be mindful. Okay, so now we go back to Kisha Gotami's story. I have a feeling this session will be all about stories. Ignore the title. It says summary. I made a mistake. It should not say summary. It should say Kisha Gotami and the master said. So continuing in her story, last week, she was telling us about her past lives. Okay. And this week, it is about her present life. Okay. So she says, due to those karmas done very well with intention and firm resolve, discarding my human body, I went to the Tawa, Timsa, or Traya Trimsha heaven. This is her life just before her life that she was born in Shakyamuni Buddha's time. So he was born in a Traya Trimsha heaven, which is a big deal. And it says, now in my final rebirth, I'm born in a clan, poor, without wealth, unprosperous, but married into a rich clan. So even though her past life, she was in a Traya Trimsha heaven, in this life, she's born in a really poor family. And I guess a lot of suffering in her life, a lot of afflictions from lack of possessions, not being able to get what she wants. But she married into a rich clan. So maybe that's a positive thing, or maybe not. She said, except, so it's not a positive thing. She said, except my husband, the others, probably her new relatives and her relatives, friends, and others are pointing at me saying, poor. So she's not respected at all, given her background. She says, but after I became a child, then I was loved by all of them. When that lucky young boy of mine, tender-bodied, comfortable, as dear to me as my own breath, then fell into Yama's power, grief-struck, voicing my misery, teary-eyed, my mouth crying out, carrying that young boy's dead corpse, I'm going around lamenting. So she conceived a baby boy, and because in old cultures, and I think even in modern times, um, um, a lot of women are being oppressed, and one way out is for them to have how you say, bear male children to the family. Um, and it's not just men who oppress; it's also mother-in-laws who do a lot of oppression, sister-in-laws, and basically just the whole family. It's just a whole culture of human beings who are not very wholesome. So she had a baby boy, her life changed. They saw her as worthy, but when the boy died, her life came crashing down because she realized that everything, she would be blamed for it, and she would lose all her, her comfort again. So for someone like that, it's the mental experience that she's going through is very similar. I guess I can't say very similar. I say would be kind of hell-like, where logic and understanding becomes unreliable, and you are controlled only by emotions. It's like a dream where your thoughts just keep on going in a loop, and you can't really pull yourself out because you are so emotional. Okay. Then he said, then examined by one doctor, approaching the best physician. She went to the best doctor in town, and she said, give me a medicine to bring my son back to life. So then, oh, sorry, I think I skipped something. So as she was carrying the body of a dead child running around, she went to the Buddha, and she asked, she said, because she thought to herself, she said, if anyone can bring my child back to life, it's the Buddha. So she went to the Buddha, and the Buddha's reply, she called the Buddha the victor skilled in crafty speech. So the Buddha's reply was, bring me a white mustard seed collected in whichever home where people dying is not known. So she said, the master has called for mustard seed in order to make medicine for my son. If this house has never before experienced any death, give me a mustard seed. So she said this to the first house she went to. And the reply that came back was, who is able to count how many have died here? So Kesa Gotami replied, then keep it. What use is that mustard seed to me? So the Buddha, all the Buddha wants from her, she said, the Buddha said was just one single mustard seed, but in a home where no one has died before. So I guess the conditions for this story is that this is in a time where villages were, how you say, I think just like any other place in the world where they are old villages, you would have multiple generations being born and who have died in the house. So that you know, it's not like how we live in the city and sometimes there are new houses being built left, right, center, but it's more of a traditional village setting. So going back to the story, so Kisagotami says she went to a second and third house. Then eventually she realized, she said her madness left her and her right mind was established thanks to the power of the Buddha. And when she understood, she uttered this verse, It's not just a truth for one village or town, nor is it a truth for a single family, but for every world settled by gods and men. This indeed is what is true impermanence. She realized that everyone is subject to death, that it is not a special thing that happened to her son, but that's a reality of life. That's when the moment you are born, you begin to die, basically. So she thought, this is the way it will be in the entire city. By means of the Blessed One's compassion for my welfare, this will be what is seen. And having gained a sense of spiritual urgency from that, she went out and covered her son in the charnel ground. Having seen me from a distance, the sweet voiced one, which is the Buddha, she's very nice in giving the Buddha very nice titles, then said to me, have you obtained, Gotami, the mustard seed? And she replied, finished, sir, is the matter of the mustard seed. You have indeed restored me. So you can see how skillful the Buddha is in teaching Gotami, Kisa Gotami, at a time when she was overcome by emotion. If you try to use logic to speak to people who are at that state, it's really, really hard for their minds to understand. So a skillful teacher like the Buddha knew what to do in order to bring Kisa Gotami out from her immense suffering, her lamentation, her sorrow, and her distress. So she said that this is what the Buddha told her. The Buddha said, better than 100 years life, not seeing how things rise and fall, is living for a single day, seeing things rising and falling. Not the condition of the village or the town, and also not the condition of the clan. This is the condition of the entire world with its gods, the impermanence of all that is. A person with a mind that clings, deranged to sons or possessions, is swept away by death that comes, like mighty flood to a sleeping town. So it is said that after she heard these verses, she became a stream enterer, which is a first stage arhat, and she asked the Buddha for permission to be a nun. So her verse goes, it says, upon hearing those two verses, I purified my Dharma eye. My Dharma eye meaning that's a way of saying she became a first stage arhat. Then learned into the great teaching, I went forth into homelessness, meaning she left home, she became a nun. Then being one who had gone forth, engaged in the dispensation, after not a very long time, I attained my arhatship. So eventually, after she became a nun, she became an arhat, a fourth stage arhat, one who has no further rebirths. She said, I mastered the superpowers like the divine ear element. I know the hearts of others too. I have done what the teacher taught. I remember my former lives. My divine eye is purified. Throwing off all the defilements, I am purified. I'm stainless. So she's, through her wisdom, she can see her past lives. She can understand the hearts or the minds of other beings. She can hear. Her hearing is not limited by the ear faculty. She can hear what goes on in the heavens, what goes on in the hells. So she's explaining her achievements as an arhat. And then she says, the teacher's been worshipped by me. I have done what the Buddha taught. The heavy load has been laid down. The ties to existence severed. What heavy load? The karmic load that we carry around. All the things that we regret that we've done, all the memories, all the people that we miss, or things I should have done, shouldn't have done. That's the load. In other words, our baggage. So her baggage has been put down. There's the reason for which I went forth from my home into homelessness. I have now achieved that purpose, destruction of all the fetters. In meaning and in the teaching, etymology and preaching, my knowledge is vast and flawless through the great sage's majesty. I'm wearing robes which are rough. My Sangati being made of a shroud picked up and brought from a cemetery along the road. So if you remember from last week, she brought forth her Bodhi resolve or her vow to end birth and death. She was inspired by a nun in a past Buddha's time who was famous, who was praised by the Buddha for her rag robes, meaning for her ascetic practices. So that vow, just like Mahamagalena's vow to save the beast, that karmic seed traveled with her all this time. And in this lifetime, she naturally gravitated towards ascetic practices, which is reflected in her robes that she wore. So she didn't want, it's not that she wore robes that were rough to be special or anything, but it came from a karmic seed that she planted many, many eons ago. So Sangati, meaning the robes of a left home person, she explained that it was a shroud brought from a cemetery along the road. So that's where it came from. And then her verses go, the victor pleased by my virtue, the guide among the multitudes, meaning the Buddha, then placed me in the foremost place of those who wear robes which are rough, meaning of all the nuns who practice ascetic practices, she became, she excelled in that. She was the best in that. My defilements are now burned up. All new existence is destroyed. Like elephants with broken chains, I am living without constraint. Being in best Buddha's presence. Okay, being in the best Buddha's presence was a very good thing for me. The three knowledges are attained. I have done what the Buddha taught. The four analytical modes and these 8 deliverances, 6 special knowledges mastered, I have done what the Buddha taught, meaning she has mastered all the teachings of the Buddha that the Buddha gave to sound hearers. So this verse, the last verse, the first sentence being in the Buddha's presence was a very good thing for me. In one of the classes, I spoke about how most people choose not to think about impermanence because it's not a pleasant thing, because it's too real, it scares us, I guess, or but I think usually because we feel helpless. But she says being in the Buddha's presence was a good thing for me, meaning she was able to, when she saw realized the reality of life, she had the Dharma as an option. She had the Buddha there and all the Buddha's nuns and monks to show her that there's a different way, that you don't have to follow along in the stream of birth and death. You can do something about it, which is practice. So the same goes for us too. We talked about how holding the precepts is the Buddha himself said that holding the precepts is similar to being by his side. Well, we don't have to feel helpless. We can actually confront all this old age, sickness, death, all the sufferings, all the afflictions, all the impermanence that is life. We actually have the tools to confront them head on. We don't have to feel helpless. And that is why we are paying so much attention to the 5 precepts and the Noble Eightfold Path, or part of the Noble Eightfold Path, because it enables us to do that. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. Ron has a question, says, can an arhat regress? What do people think? Can an arhat regress? According to the suttas, I would say that the answer is no. Because once you are a first stage arhat, even a stream enterer, there are certain delusions or confusions that you have severed, and you only have 7, a maximum of 7 more rebirth or less before you end birth and death for good. When even just a first stage arhat, a stream enterer, has utmost faith, they have unwavering faith in the Buddha's teachings. And it's not because they believe in something like how we believe in something. The confidence that they have comes from they are seeing the Dharma. They have enough experience or no, enough experience. What's the another word? They have seen it for themselves. They have seen enough for themselves. Just like you drinking water, you realize that yes, that's water. That's not bleach. That's not alcohol. You know, you are 100% confident because you have drank the glass or you have taken a sip that it's water. So too, they have that kind of unshakable confidence in the Dharma because it comes from experience. Okay, so the next slide that I have is the conclusion where the person who was recounting this story says, thus indeed Bhikkhuni Kisa Gotami spoke these verses. The legend of Kisa Gotami Teri means elder nun, is finished. So there are two versions of Kisa Gotami's journey to encountering the Dharma, both of which are really heart-wrenching. If you turn it into a movie, it's a kind of movie that everyone cries, the kind of movie. It would make for an excellent Korean or Bollywood movie. But before we go to the second movie, there's another sutta that I want to share this week before and if we have enough time, then I'll give you the second version of Kisa Gotami. So this is called the Ganda Bakka Sutta. And it's about how attachment creates suffering. So at a point in time, he said on one occasion, the Blessed One, or the Buddha, was staying among the Malans in a Malan town named Uruvela Kappa. Then Ganda Bakka, the headman, the chief of the village, he said, went to the Blessed One, and on arrival, having bowed down to him, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, it would be good, Lord, if the Blessed One would teach me the origination and ending of stress. So being a chief of the village, you are probably wise and usually quite elderly. But at the same time, you get to, everyone with any problem comes to you. You have some stupid fight with your neighbor, who puts their flower pot 1 inch over your property line and it makes you very unhappy. What do? You go to the chief village. Someone steals your cow, you go to the chief village. Or you suspect someone of stealing your cow, you go to the chief. So I guess, and I'm just imagining, Ganda Bakka is very respected, but at the same time has to deal with all kinds of stupid problems and problems of his own, I guess. And, which comes to his question, he wants to know how to end. He says, where does stress come from and how can he end stress? Okay, poor guy. All right. So Buddha said, Hitman, if I were to teach you the origination and ending of stress with reference to the past, saying, thus it was in the past, you would be doubtful and perplexed. If I were to teach you the origination and ending of stress with reference to the future, saying, thus it will be in the future, you will be doubtful and perplexed. So instead, I sitting right here will teach you, sitting right here, there, the origination and ending of stress. Listen and pay close attention, I will speak. What I think this means is that the Buddha is going to explain in a way that speaks to Ganda Bakka's actual situation. So by saying present, by saying past or future, he's not going to tell him a story like, okay, like now I'm telling you this, the Ganda Bakka Sutta, and we have to imagine ourselves in the position of Ganda Bakka for it to make sense. But just like how the Buddha taught Kisa Gotami, which was very expedient, instead of giving the teaching like a principle directly, he created the conditions for Kisa Gotami to realize it herself, which is because then it speaks to her own how you say, the teachings are meant for you to realize something in yourself. Let's put it this way. So this is what the Buddha is saying. So instead of talking about the past or the future, in other words, maybe someone else's, or it says, I'll speak to your present condition right now. Okay. Meaning, make it relevant. Okay, which is why I always say that when we read the sutras, we have to engage with the sutras to make the sutra come alive through our own experience. It has to be something that makes sense to us. All right. Okay. So the Buddha said, now what do you think, headman? Are there any people in Uruvela who, if they were murdered or imprisoned or fined or censored, would cause sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair to arise in you? So the headman replied, yes, Lord. There are people in this town who, if they were, any misfortune befalls them, he would despair, okay, which would cause pain in him. So probably these are people who he cares about, his family, maybe people in his village, his grandparents. You don't want them to be, for any misfortune or any sorrow to arise in them. Then the Buddha asks another question. It says, are there any people in Uruvela who, if they were murdered or imprisoned or fined or censored, would cause no sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair to arise in you? And he says, yes, Lord, there are people in the city who, if misfortune befalls them, it wouldn't affect him at all. Like, he wouldn't care. Okay. So the Buddha is now asking, what's the difference? Okay, and he says, now what is the cause? What is the reason why the murder, imprisonment, fining, or censure of some of the people in this town will cause you sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, or despair, whereas for some other people, it would not cause you the same kind of affliction? So he replied, he says, those people who, instead, I won't read everything. He says, that would cause, whose afflictions would also cause him afflictions, are those for whom I feel desire and passion, meaning people who are dear to him, he cares about. And then the second paragraph, he explains that, other people who undergo suffering and it doesn't affect him are people that he feels no desire or passion for. People who he either couldn't care less about or have no meaning to him. They don't have any affinities or connection to him. So the Buddha says, now, headman, from what you have realized, fathomed, attained right now in the present, without regard to time, you may draw an influence with regard to the past and future. Whatever stress in arising arose for me in the past, all of it had desire as its root, had desire as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. And whatever stress in arising will arise for me in the future, all of it will have desire as a root, will have desire as the cause, as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. So desire, in other words, greed, attachments, love, anything that we create a connection to. Okay, so that's desire. So after he said this, Ganda Bakka, the headman, said, amazing Lord, stupendous. This is like some amazing teaching to Ganda Bakka. It says, how well the Blessed One has put it. Whatever stress in arising arose for me in the past, all of it had desire as its root, had desire as its cause. For desire is the cause of stress. And whatever stress in arising will arise for me in the future, all of it will have desire as the root, will have desire as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. So when I read this, his reply, amazing Lord, stupendous, I was like, why is this teaching so special for Ganda Bakka? Where I, when I read it, I say, everyone knows desire or attachment causes afflictions or suffering. I guess for Ganda Bakka, it was something that became really personal to him. It was not just an understanding, but it was a revelation of himself, of how the way he chose to lead his life attributed to what he got back in his life. So I think for Ganda Bakka, it went really deep. And after he said this, he shared with the Buddha, he said, I have a son, Lord, named Chiravasi, who lives far away from here. When I get up in the morning, I send a man saying, go learn how Chiravasi is doing. And as long as that man has not returned, I am simply beside myself thinking, don't let Chiravasi be sick. Now, headman, so the Buddha now asked him, what do you think? If Chiravasi were to be murdered or imprisoned or fined or censured, would you feel sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair? Then the headman replied, if my son Chiravasi were to be murdered, etc., he says, my very life would be altered. So how could I not feel sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair? So after hearing the Buddha's teaching, he immediately realized that his son is very dear to him, to the point that, every morning, first thing he does when he wakes up is he wants to find out how is his son doing, to that extent. And so he knows how the way he frames, he knows his relationship with his son and how that creates worry in the son. And then the Buddha questions him further. The Buddha says, now what do you think, headman? Giving him more food for thought. He says, before you had seen or heard of Chiravasi's mother, meaning his wife, he says, did you feel desire, passion, or love for her? He says, no, Lord. He says, and after you had seen or heard of Chiravasi's mother, did you feel desire, passion, or love for her? And he said, yes, Lord. He says, what do you think? If Chiravasi's mother were to be murdered or imprisoned or fined or censured, would you feel any afflictions at all? Basically, that's what the Buddha asks. He says, Lord, my very life would be altered. So how could I not feel sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair? So the Buddha concludes by saying, thus, headman, by this line of reasoning, it may be realized how stress when arising arises. All of it has desire as its root, has desire as its cause, for desire is the cause of stress. So now, if anyone here is thinking, putting on their thinking cap or contemplation cap, you'll be wondering, how can we, but isn't this normal? Or isn't love and care for people that are dear to us important so we can take care of them? Yes, but as we shall learn in the following classes, there's also something called right intention that the Buddha taught. So first of the Noble Eightfold Path is right view. Second one is right intention. What is right intention? Right intention gives us a way where we can channel the feelings and emotions that we have into wholesome ways, where even though we may not be able to escape from feeling sorrow, how the Buddha, let me change the slide, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress. We may not be able to avoid that, given that we are still in the Saha world. But actually, we don't have despair. Why? Because we have right intentions. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry, because in the following classes that will I will share more on how we can channel that. It's time. Let me see. Okay, so there's a question about listening to, can we listen to precepts when we have not taken them? For example, the Bodhisattva Precepts, yes, you can listen to the teaching of precepts even though you have not taken them. In Mahayana, it is not encouraged to learn about the precepts of left-home people in Mahayana. In Theravada, for example, like in Thailand and Sri Lanka, there's no such thing. The precepts there's no restriction for lay people to even go and study the precepts of monastics, although unless it's for very specific reasons, unless you are a very devoted Dharma protector and you want to be able to, you want to enable, because you're very close to the monks and you want to enable the monks to maintain their lifestyle, you learn the Dharma so you can support them. Other than that, I would say, why bother unless you want to be a monastic? If not, learning the 5 precepts before you have taken them, learning the 8 precepts, learning the 10, maybe not 10 precepts. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. And Bodhisattva precepts are fine. But given the tendency of human beings to judge people, I would say be very careful for anyone who anyone who maintains precepts and who knows about precepts, whether you hold the precepts or not. If you start looking at other people and judging them through the precepts, then that is absolutely not what the precepts is meant to do. And then you have turned the precepts into something unwholesome, because then you are creating obstacles for yourself within the Dharma. So what precepts are meant to do is a very personal thing. You hold it and you maintain it for yourself, and you don't care how other people are doing it, unless it's your job. Okay, if it's not your job, if no one has appointed you to be the Dharma police, then what you do is the intention of the precepts is for you to govern your own thoughts, your speech, and your actions. And thoughts meaning, don't go and think about how other people are holding the precepts. Unless they're doing a very good job of holding the precepts, then you use them as an example. That's a wholesome way, that's good. But as we now know, because there's intention behind precepts, behind all actions for it to be karma, when other people do things they may not understand or whatever it is, you may not understand the precepts very well. So to judge others is not something you ever want to do, because then you're not even following basically the whole point of the precepts. Okay, is that understood? So precepts, don't be a camera, like Shifu says, don't be a camera. A camera can only take pictures of everything else, but not itself. Use precepts as a way to be mindful of your present. What are you doing right now? What are you thinking right now? What are you saying right now? Use precepts for that. Okay. So we did not do the second story of Kisah Gotami. Maybe I'll share it next week if it fits into the topic of right intention. Okay, let me see what other questions are. So no one has helped Ron with his question about how to deal with Buddhist articles, memorabilia, photos that he has collected all this time. I would suggest, Ron, that maybe one way is to still treat it as the Dharma, which you already know. That's why you don't want to be casual about it. And look around in your house, maybe divert some of that energy into making a place for all these things, or for how you say, discarding other things that probably might be less important, that you may not have used, and help other people out along the way, and create space for that. We have questions. Can we burn it, bury on top of a hill, or burn it? Technically, yes. If I remember, I don't have the source. I think it's maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it comes from the sutras or the Chinese culture thing. But when I was a novice monk, I remember hearing that you can burn and then you bury in a place that no one is going to walk over. I think all that is just to make sure that you have the right, that your intention is not unwholesome when you do all this, because the last thing you want to do is how would I put it? Be too casual, and you planting the seed of being casual with the Dharma that may arise in the next life, where there's an opportunity to encounter the Dharma, but you're casual with it, and you just delay your own chance for awakening, something like that. Yeah. I don't really know about the burning or burying on top of a hill or things like that. I would say be very selective with the things that you pick up. If you want to go out, don't greedily, pick those up. And I'm sure a lot of people have other things, advice for that. Yeah. Some temples, they when they build a statue, they collect all this from people and they put it in the statue of the Buddha as a way to avoid, burning or destroying. But at the end of the day, everyone's conditions are very different, very specific. So always come back to your intention. As long as you're not careless, you're not being flippant, you're not just trying to pass the responsibility to someone else. Just pay attention to all those. Okay, I'm going to stop this slideshow and then we can transfer merit. Okay. Okay, I'm going to invite everyone to join me in putting our palms together as we transfer merit. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. We'll do 3 bows to the Buddha and Shifu. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. All right, everyone. We will see you next week where we will explore right intention. meaning what is the heart that we use when we hold the precepts. Now that we understand a bit more about the precepts and how important precepts is, as we maintain the precepts, what is behind the maintaining of the precepts. And then it makes a lot of sense to me, so I hope it will also make a lot of sense to everyone. All right, see you next week. Amitabha, bye-bye.
Amitabha, thank you, Fasu.